Hello, dear ones, and welcome to Mindful Compassion Hour, the six-part Compassionate Relationship with Suffering series. While this may be our last session of this particular series, we will be returning with other series in the future, so be on the lookout for announcements. The mission of the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation is to establish optimal quality of life for the Northwest Parkinson's community through awareness, education, advocacy, and care. My name is Barcha Wachtel, and I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker, mental health professional, and mindful self-compassion trained teacher through the Center for MSC out of University of California, San Diego. I also have a private practice here in Seattle, Washington called Engaging Mindfulness, Forging Meaning, or EMFM for short. You can find out more about the programs of EMFM at www.emfm.space. Mindful Compassion Hour is a partnership between the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation and EMFM. The mission of EMFM is to engage people of diverse identities and abilities in cultivating wise attention, deep meaning, and fiercely compassionate ways of being as the foundations for transformation, interconnection, and well-being. The Compassionate Relationship with Suffering series is a 6-session series which is developed to provide educational support for people living with chronic conditions as well as their caregivers in the basic practices of compassion, both self-compassion and compassion towards others, our experiences, and it's based in psychological neuroscience and Buddhist psychology. It's teaching us how to respond to difficulty with understanding and kindness, and the practices are correlated with physical and emotional well-being outcomes. To sign up for any of these programs, you can go to www.nwpf.org. These series are always available online, they're free, and they archive all of the previous sessions. And so you can find any of these, including ones that we've done in the past. And as we said earlier, we're going to be back in the future. So EMFM provides support and education for those impacted by ongoing mental and physical health challenges in personal, social, and professional life through professionally facilitated educational seminars. Although the information and support provided can be psychoeducational in nature, these seminars are not counseling, nor are they therapy groups, and EMFM is not providing healthcare services. You should not use the information contained herein for diagnosing or treating any mental or physical health condition. Participation in EMFM and WPF seminars do not create a mental health provider-patient relationship. We recommend that you always consult with a medical and/or mental health professional for medical or mental health advice or information about diagnosis and treatment. By viewing and engaging in this seminar, you acknowledge and agree that if you feel uncomfortable in any way, you have the right and responsibility to take good care of yourself by disengaging from the seminar or any practice at any time. And we give that message with a tremendous sense of compassion and kindness because we want you to take good care of yourself. So that disengagement isn't about punishing anyone. It's just about taking responsibility for that. Otherwise, we defeat the purpose of learning how to be kind to ourselves. So sometimes that kindness comes from disengaging. And then as always, these are our disclosures, organizational relationships, just so you know where I am coming from as far as funding streams. So we always like to be on the up and up around that. So again, you're noticing from beginning to end, always when I teach, there's this aspect of repetition that sometimes we can roll our eyes a little bit and say, oh, haven't we been over this? But that's part of the power of the practice, is that we're wiring a different way of understanding our own experiences in our mind and body and relationships and allowing ourselves to engage in repetition so it really sinks in and becomes something more than just a tool or a technique or a toolbox that we reach out to and then pull out whenever we need it. In mindfulness, what we're really trying to do is cultivate a practice of awareness that becomes a part of who we are. So it's always with us as a part of our habits and behaviors, um, as a part of who we are rather than something that we reach out for. So it's these internal resources that we're building up. So we always go over this information about what are we here for. So what we're here for is to practice a little bit, right? And that's always that cultivation of awareness, awareness of both the mind and our body and our well-being and our connection to ourselves and to others. The other thing that we're doing is we're learning how to live well, I mean, and even starting out to learn how to identify our core values. Like, what do we connect with what we need, and what maybe others need when we see them suffering? So it's centering ourselves in our own core values as resources that then they don't just sit there in an unconscious kind of way, but they become a practiced resource, right? So values are the basis, and then we practice out of those into intention, into ourselves and into the world, right? So if I have a value of love, that can just sit there and I can get kind of lost and disconnected from it. But if I'm repeating that in the mind as a part of my practice, then it's much more readily available for me as an intention to be like, oh, may I be loving to myself? Or I wish you love because you're hurting or suffering to another person, right? Relating that way. So we're centering and living our own core values. And we've talked before, especially those first few seminars, of how our spirituality and religious practice can fit within the Buddhist psychology as a structure of practice to get those things worked into our body and into our mind, right? So they're always available to us. So it's not about rejecting or accepting anything. It's about allowing yourself to lean into whatever is deeply valuable for you in values, and then practicing through intention out of those values into the world. Okay, so it's not about mine. It is about your values and getting connected with those. And then it's also about beginner's mind. So it's okay to start at the very beginning. Every time we feel that somehow there's even the perception of failure or making a mistake, that within practice we learn this perseverance of also taking responsibility of saying, hey, I made a mistake. And then we begin back at that experience again of practicing. So we can let go of being the expert, right? So it gets to be a practice that works its way into us over time. And then it's also about allowing, right? Balanced awareness of this moment. It's not about trying to make something happen. It's actually not about even trying to make pain go away, because that's going to come and go. It's not about trying to push away thoughts within our mind, because those are going to come and go, or difficult relationships, which we talked about last session. But it's about allowing the present moment to show up on its own terms. And then by accepting that, opening ourselves up to that relationship, then we begin to shift and change both in our awareness and the way that we perceive as what's valuable to us in the moment. So we can let go of trying to make our body sit still. We might work with being still, and then our body may not cooperate, or we might work with stilling the mind and focusing on something, and then we get pulled off of that. But that is allowing that to happen, and then you come back to your point of focus, right? So, and we can let go of feeling like we have to relax, or that something major has to happen around euphoria or seeing bright lights or having a big spiritual experience. It's about that, again, balanced awareness in this moment, the only moment that we have. And then it's about testing it out, bringing our own best scientists to the experience and saying, what am I noticing about this way of paying attention? And does it make a difference in my life? Right? So noticing what happens in truth. And then the overarching focus of this particular seminar series, we decided to focus on primarily this sense of relationship, right? So we practice compassion not to make our suffering go away, but because we are suffering, right? If the person outside of ourselves is suffering in some way, and then even if we can't take away all of their pain, we're still going to respond to that with a sense of care and love and kindness, right? And so that doesn't stop us from responding, but often we feel like we have to feel like all of our pain has to go away in order to relate to ourselves in a kind, gentle way. And that's not the purpose. There's this emotional layer, right? Remember the first and second arrows, which we'll get to again. When those stack, we start to believe that, oh, if I can make my pain go away, then somehow I'll suffer less. But often, if we're able to accept this first layer of pain, right, the non-negotiable pain in life, that then the way that we relate, that secondary pain, we can allow ourselves to work with being open to our experience and letting go of that. And again, it's a practice. It's easier said than done. So, but the most important thing is this quote from Chris Germer of mindfulness is a special relationship with suffering. So we look at it as this practice of the little kid within us, or a little kid that we know, kind of tugging on our shirt strings, right? Of saying, hey, I'm hurting, right? And then we have the tendency to fight that little child, or to run away, or to shut it down, right? And so we're learning how to open up to that experience and actually have a relationship with the parts of us that hurt. So when we go to give ourselves compassion, there are three kinds of reactions that show up, right? So strong emotions primarily are what we're on the lookout for. So pleasant, right? That laughter, euphoria, sometimes that happens, relaxation, and then neutral, maybe we feel a sense of numbness in the body, or I don't know, or nothing at all, right? We're just like, I don't feel anything. So that those two things commonly happen. And then on that third experience, the unpleasant, is sometimes we have that backdraft that shows up that we talked about in the previous sessions, where we feel a sense of anger showing up, a sense of injustice or tears or anxiousness. And that is a part of what we're looking toward having a relationship with, so that it doesn't become such a ticking time bomb in the course of our experience of suffering through life. We're like, oh, I know what it's like to be with anger, but anger doesn't take over me. I know what it's like to be tearful, but I've learned how to accept that tearfulness is letting go of stress in the body. Or I notice my anxiety, but it doesn't have to rule every decision that I make. Right. So we learn how to work with those unpleasant experiences. But sometimes that shows up in an overwhelming way, right? So sometimes that is going to show up in the moment, and it can be uncomfortable. And then we'll talk about how to deal with that when it shows up, how to be with it in a relationship in a short kind of attending way. The other thing too, as we've talked about before, introverts and extroverts, and this kind of concept of closing and opening, that we sometimes do become very defensive or sleepy or distracted or overwhelmed. So we might feel very closed off to ourselves, but also to others, right? And we move in and out of that space over the course of the day, weeks, months. We kind of go through these seasons within our own experience of feeling more closed off and protected. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The other thing that we do is sometimes we open up when we feel, right? And we'll be talking a little bit, not a little bit. The focus of today is kind of that third component of self-compassion, where we learn how to respond with love, not only to ourselves, to give ourselves what we need, but then so that we have love to give or care to others when they're hurting. So if we're open, then there can be this greater sense of being able to receive love and to give love, right? So we learn how to be attentive, leaning in and sharing both with ourselves in our experience, but also with others, right? So it's a practice in what we create and habit towards ourselves ends up being how we relate to other people as well. And even as we move through this particular session, it's okay to feel that sense of opening and closing. And you can kind of monitor, like a faucet, how open or closed you would like to be to any given practice or concept, and paying attention to that inner sense of wisdom of what feels okay for right now. Right. So, immediate self care options in this moment are always that starting with the question, what does my body or my emotions need in this moment? Right. So just asking yourself that question right now internally. Kindness, curiosity, courage. Right. So just checking in with that. They often are connected with our values, right? Compassion, love, justice, kindness are a lot of my values. Those are the things that I think of often when I ask that question of myself when I'm having difficulty. What does my body or my emotions need in this moment? The second thing is always that that message that can feel uncomfortable that I repeat, but it is out of that sense of self-awareness of, like, it's okay to leave sometimes. It's okay to leave a circumstance, a situation, a relationship, sometimes a conversation, right? It's okay to leave if that means that it's taking good care of your emotions and your body, and paying attention to that. So if overwhelm begins to show up, that can be a beautiful source of taking good care of yourself. The the other one there is following the breath. So just begin by taking a deep in breath, and then nice and slow on the out breath. And then just at your pace, just continue taking a deep inhalation, and then at your own pace, extra long on the exhale. And then just noticing how the body feels in this moment. Sometimes just being with, right? There's still that relationship there. Being with the breath can give a sense of possibly ease in the body, or sometimes we still may be feeling a little bit dysregulated, a little bit more closed, or maybe a little bit of backdraft is still coming up, right? Sometimes remembering the soothing touch practice, right? We can connect with our difficulty in the body by placing our hand over the heart, or over the stomach, or over the face, or the arms, right? But sometimes, if that feels overwhelming, then we're moving into grounding our awareness further away from the emotion centers through the midline of the body, right? We begin moving into the extremities and just noticing, right? Just begin touching or tapping your fingertips, maybe even opening and closing the hands. It's okay if they're shaking or the body's not holding still in other ways. Just noticing the hands and what feels good to the hands in this moment. And now placing awareness into the feet. Even if you're lying down, just noticing the feet. You can wiggle the toes. And it's okay if there's numbness or if you can't feel the feet. Some people have conditions where that's a part of it. And so you just do your best in the moment of feeling what you can feel, or feeling a part probably closest up to where you feel in the body, but still keeping it out in the legs or in the arms. But in the feet, just noticing toes, soles of the feet, and back toward the heels. You Can even rock the feet just a little bit. Right. And then just noticing how you feel overall in the body. So, again, each of these practices may or may not connect with everyone. And so that's why we give you lots of options to notice kind of what helps soothe me in the moment when I'm feeling discomfort, right? And so now I just want you to stop again, allow the eyes to close and just noticing ambient sounds in the room. Just noticing sounds coming and going as sounds. And allowing your awareness to come back into the room. And again, just noticing in the body, how do I feel in this moment? And now we move into the practice that we introduced a few sessions ago, this universal sound of relaxation and compassion. So we start with the ah, taking a deep breath in. Ah. And again. Ah. One more time. Ah. Just making that sound. And then just noticing, what does the universal sound of compassion feel like, of relaxation sound like, and feel like in the body? See, even I make mistakes. So just noticing how that feels to make that sound. And then we tilt our heads a little bit as we prepare to do the sound of compassion. The image of the puppy or the kitten or the other pet kind of struggling to get upstairs. And then we take a deep in breath and then, oh, just making that sound. Oh, and one more time. Oh, and then just noticing in the body, how does that feel to attend to difficulty by making that gentle vocal sound, right? Just noticing. All right. So, as always, we come back to this concept of the wandering mind and its connection with us around negativity bias and being caught up in the things that are going wrong, right? That we spend about 46.9% of the time in this mind wandering. And it does three things, right? That cultivation of self, right? It creates an image of who we are, an idea of who we are, projects into the future and into the past. And then it looks for problems, and that's that negativity bias. And then when we spend a lot of time there, as we do half of our time, it has this tremendous power to influence our emotion states where we're not very happy, right? Because it's designed to keep us in a state of worry or anxiousness so that we're on the lookout for predators, right? Because predators will kill us, so we want to survive, but it's not interested in our happiness. And so that's something that has to be cultivated, right? And so the way that this happens is that we're on the lookout for problems, right? And so we have a pain experience in life where maybe we get hurt, we end up with a chronic illness, someone says something to us that hurts our feelings, right? And we don't have control over that. So that first arrow of suffering shows up. And then on top of it, we resist the pain, right? And then exponentially, we suffer in relationship to how we resist that experience, right? So the wish that things be different than the way that they are makes us suffer more. So that pain times resistance equals suffering. Or if we get an experience of pleasure and then we try to hang on to it, right? And then life starts to happen again, right? That rising and falling of pain and difficulty and problems. And then we try to strive to fix our life or control it so that we never experience pain. And then we end up suffering again in that process. So the new information that I wanted to share with you today is kind of how this part of the brain in connection with the default mode network works. So all around um, the parts of our brain that perceive, right, vision, hearing, touch, our motor actions, and the images that we see, there are these cortical clusters of columns, 6 neurons deep. I have a little example of just an idea of what it looks like. 6 neurons deep, they're stacked on top of each other. And what happens is that there's this two-way flow that happens. So it looks at the present moment and says, what's happening right now? And then that information moves through these bottom 3 neurons of the 6 cell stack. So 6 through 4 fires and says, here's what's happening in the moment in smelling or seeing or feeling something, right? And then simultaneously, it pulls implicit. So we're not even aware of it, but it starts saying, is there anything that ever smelled, tastes, looks like this experience? And then that fires down through 1 through 3. And then our perception, the way that we perceive what's happening even in the moment, crashes between cells 3 and 4. And that's how we interpret the present moment. So when our reactivity or resistance is constantly overwhelming our present moment awareness, then we get into this pervasive reactivity where we're fearful, anxious, worried all the time, right? Because we're pulling information from the past, maybe when we authentically were in immediate danger or risk or hurt in some way. And then something happens in the moment that reminds us subconsciously of that. And then suddenly we're very reactive constantly, right? And so that's some of the work out of the Mindsight Institute, Daniel Siegel. And then a group of researchers, Todd and his and their group of researchers in 2015, found that when we are in these fear, anxious, worried states, that there's an experience of uncertainty, and then the way that we perceive the present moment, it's constantly hijacking our alarm system, the amygdala, and it's overactive. And then we can't empathize with ourselves. It shuts down our capacity to empathize, right? Because in order to be empathetic, we have to cognitively resonate, to place ourselves in other people's shoes, and to be able to be aware that we are affectively resonating emotionally with other people. Like when someone's in a bad mood around us, we can be like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm feeling affected by that. And I'm noticing that this person is in a bad mood. And then it becomes contagious and we can be taken over by that. So suddenly, maybe if I'm with my partner and they're in an experience, right, those downward spirals, then that's going to begin to affect me. And then I'm going to see it as a danger and become reactive. And so then I have a hard time empathizing with myself or with my partner, and I can just become reactive. But if I can name it, right, name it, tame it, feel it, heal it. We went over that early on. So this is the way that all of the mechanism of that comes together. So this perceiving planning cortex sends signals into the midbrain where the amygdala is, right? And the memory centers also pulled up this information implicitly. And then it's sending signals down through the brainstem saying, you need to freak out, right? You need to freeze or fight or flight. So mindfulness helps us to name those emotions and to feel the way that they feel so that we're always practicing that sense of awareness of paying attention to what's happening while it's happening with acceptance or non-judgment. right? And then there's that awareness of awareness that, like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm paying attention to this experience in relationship or with the chaos in the world right now with a sense of fear or anxiousness. And can I practice in a particular way of being warm or loving, peaceful, open, or fierce in whatever it is that I need to do so that I don't have to be taken over by that threat defense system. So, and then we've talked about the way that this works in the research of helping us to regulate particular systems within the body. So, improvements around sleep systems, right? Those epigenetics, our stress level reductions, impulsivity, right? You can see how this is tying in with our reactivity, our trauma impact, right? Perceiving planning cortex pulls from our past traumas, and then the activation of pain centers, right? We might be perceiving more pain that is present in the moment. And again, that's not blaming anyone. That's not saying you're not trying hard enough. It's just that over time, this is what practice helps us to come out of a little bit. And then those regulations of the neurotransmitters and body chemistry, which is part of what we're going to be talking about today as well. So now we're looking again at this three-part system of the way that the threat defense system works is that when we have a stressful situation in relationship to external experiences, we get into a stress response, fight, flight, freeze, right? Freezing and then running away or standing and fighting. And because our relationship is complicated within our own system, that then often we turn this threat defense system inward. So the stress response gets turned inward, and we get, in freeze response turned inward, we get self absorbed and stuck, right? We're constantly in a state of being controlled by our depression in particular. That kind of depresses us, right? And we get caught up in it. And that causes us to not be able to see opportunity because we're just so closed into our experience. And then if our stress response turned inward is self isolation, right? The flight response of running away, of isolating ourselves from other people. And there's a lot of isolation that we have to do right now during the pandemic. And then we also can get cut off from our own internal felt sense of connection with our body or emotions, right? So that's kind of that. It will be hard for those people initially to answer that question: what is it that my body or my emotions need? I don't know. I'm completely cut off from that. And so that's an experience that we have sometimes. And then the third one there is that fight response turned inward is then when we become highly self-critical, self-judgmental. And those are mechanisms of the mind that kind of plays these particular messages over and over again. So the antidote is to get out of those experiences is mindfulness, to name it and tame it by being aware of our emotions and how they feel in the body as much as possible. And then that common humanity, recognizing everyone in a certain degree is experiencing a suffering similar to what I'm feeling. So it's never going to be exactly the same. But again, out of billions of people, the likelihood that someone feels the way that you are is really high. Okay. So even if we're alone, we can acknowledge that there are other people like us suffering in the way that we are. And that helps us to feel a little more connected to that greater humanity of suffering. And then the third there is the antidote to self-criticism and self-judgment is a practice of self-kindness. And this is where that relationship, that intention of care comes out of our values and what's important to us. So if I'm hard on myself and say, oh, Barcha, you're broken, then I might come from my values and say, well, I actually also have a value that all beings are really whole and are doing the best that they can. And so then words of kindness can show up of like, oh, may I be kind to myself? May I acknowledge that struggle is a part of life and it's okay for me to struggle a little bit, right? So I'm learning how to relate to myself in these kind, gentle ways. And this is also tied in with a little bit more of what we're going to talk about around love today. So, and then we have the benefits of self-compassion. Again, these emotional, relational, and biological changes that also I need to add in on the biological changes is we're seeing new research coming out that through these practices as well around compassion, that the repetition of these self-compassionate and compassionate phrases towards others literally changes gray matter density as well, just like mindfulness itself does. So today, in this final session of the six-part series, wanted to talk about this third component of compassion, right? So we can call it love, we can call it care, or alleviating suffering, whatever words you're comfortable with. But ultimately, it does come down to this kind of universal love for humanity that has been studied by a researcher named Barbara Friedrichsen, which we talked about a little bit last session. She's the director of positive emotions and psychophysiology laboratory at University of North Carolina. She wrote a book on her research, I want to say around 2013, 2014, pardon me, called Love 2.0, Creating Happiness and Health in Moments of Connection. And I highly recommend the book. I don't own any stock, so no money comes back to me. But Barbara and her team in the lab, when they looked at love, they were interested in measuring in the moment, like what happens to us when we're able to get to love as that third component of compassion. We can go back for a moment and look at that. Self-compassion on the far right-hand side, right? And this is compassion as well, is it's mindfulness, that empathy, and then common humanity, that we feel a sense of connection between ourselves and the humanity of all beings. And then that third component, self-kindness, or kindness towards others, is an act of love, right? And so Barbara was really looking at that universal sense of friendship and love and connection. It doesn't have to be like a romantic love or a sexual love. She was just interested in like these moments of love, and can they be cultivated, and what happens within our body. So the way that she defined it was that micro moment of warmth, right? Because love as an emotion is going to come and go. So that micro moment of warmth and connection that you share with another living being, right? There's this sense of connection that happens in the experience of behaving a particular way towards ourselves or towards others. So, and the research is really strong that love, this sense of the mammalian caregiving system, right? We talked a little bit about the three components that bring about, that activate the mammalian caregiving system is gentle vocalizations, soothing touch, and physical warmth, right? So this gets generated even between us, even if we're not necessarily touching. So this experience in the body that helps us to settle stress hormones is essential for thriving and health. So infants and babies literally start to die if they don't get the touch that they need. And as adults, human beings, particularly in a time when a lot of us are isolated, that lack of touch and connection can cause us to feel stressed, and we start to feel disconnected if we don't get good touch. So it's the one emotion that makes us feel most fully alive when we feel it in the moment, that look, that sense of connection, and feel the most fully human. Okay. So how does this work? So love's bedrock prerequisites are this positivity resonance that emerges within certain circumstances. So again, we're just talking about the emotion, and I'm going to differentiate this from a practice. And so we'll get to what creates increases of this sense of emotion, of being in the body. So the prerequisites, what needs to happen even before we can often get to love, is this positivity resonance that emerges within certain circumstances and people, stemming from particular patterns of thought or action. So when we're in the moment, starting to even think about connecting with someone, we have a felt sense of what that person feels like in our body, right? I'm talking emotionally. So if you were to say a name of different family members or friends or even pets, the minute that you say their name, you're going to feel a sense in your body of what that being feels like, right? So the first prerequisite is a perception of safety. So often when we begin to think about our connections with other living beings, we'll often move away from people that we don't feel a sense of safety, and then we tend to lean in to people and experiences where there's a perception of safety. So emotional or physical, it could even be kind of this passive aggressive thing that shows up with some people, or disconnection of like, this just doesn't feel safe in my body. So that perception of safety is a bedrock to a prerequisite, right, of feeling and being able to engage in a loving relationship. As again, the emotion, we have to be physically present. So that second piece there, we have to be physically present. So having these moments of oneness, of being open, once we feel safe, and then we're opening up, right? We talked about closing and opening. So we're very present physically with this other being or beings that we're hanging out with. And then as you're noticing in the social connection, is there eye contact, right? Is this a person that can look you in the eye and have a sense of, again, that sense of safety and trust? Or are they avoidant, or are they completely disconnected from the experience, looking away and not even looking in the direction of, are they just kind of talking to the air? Or are they avoiding eye contact more than they're actually making eye contact? So those are the three prerequisites: the perception, physically and emotionally, that I'm going to be safe with this being or beings. Am I physically present with them? And are they physically present with me and being open? And then is there good eye contact? So those are all the good bedrock prerequisites of love that show up in the lab when Barbara Friedrichsen and her neat team were looking at this process. And then once those three criteria are met, then there's the momentary upwelling of three tightly interwoven events. And this is the actual emotion of love. So what happens is we share one or more positive emotions between yourself and this other person. So that could be a sense of like looking at a sunset or a sunrise, and this sense of awe that shows up, and you're there with someone and you kind of look at each other and you're feeling this great sense of awe of how small you are, but how connected everything is. Or perhaps a sense of peace of sitting in a chair, maybe around a fire, and there's this sense of peacefulness, of feeling relaxed, and you're looking at each other. And there's kind of that warm smile that shows up, right? So sharing one or more. So it doesn't even have to be love. It can be any pleasant emotion that shows up, and then you're around that, you're sharing it, right? So then the second thing is that when we're around each other in that shared emotion, there's this simultaneous biochemical, neurochemical shift that begins to happen in our brains. The same parts of the brain that are lit up in you begin to light up in the people around you. So altogether, you're sharing this affective kind of emotion resonance, and your biochemistry begins to mirror and shift between all of you, two or more who are there together, right? That begins to shift in the moment. And then we feel this internal kind of movement of emotive, like it's almost like a belief system begins to shift within us to want to invest in your health and well-being, to be a part of your life and the well-being of others, right? So towards yourself and towards others, and then they're feeling it towards you. So there's this sense of the connection that we have right now shared between us, that I know I'm going to be cared for, right? So what happens around this is that when we practice loving kindness as that third component of our relational connection with others, right? That it's not just empathy and just mindfulness, right? We can't just affectively resonate. We can't just be cut off from that experience, right? We have to have that sense of mindfulness, and then a sense that we're connected, and then a sense that we want to respond. with love and kindness and gentleness. So the way that this works is if we are practicing through mindfulness, right, the compassion practices, and we'll be doing loving kindness today, that if we're repeating phrases of love toward ourselves and towards others, that begins to cause structural changes in our brain, right? And that's what Barbara Friedrichsen and her team were looking at is like, does this repetition impact anything in our lives? So what she found was the repetition of loving phrases or compassion phrases, even towards ourselves and towards others, causes structural changes in the brain, right? So those structural changes fire together in connection with our thoughts about ourselves, because we're sending the phrases to ourselves and toward other people. And so those structural changes in the brain are in relationship to ourselves and to others. And then it shifts our emotion states. Unpleasant emotion states decrease, and pleasant emotion states increase. And then because of that, in connection with thinking about difficulty in our own lives and in others, and sending these phrases, our behavior begins to change. We don't get so angry. We're a little bit more gentle with the way that we gesture and around space with people. We start noticing how we think about ourselves and the way that we take good care of ourselves. Maybe people start noticing of like, I notice you place your hand over your heart or over your stomach when you're having difficulty. So our behavior begins to change, and maybe we're relating to others in a different way. And then the outcome of that is that we have these increased moments of love and connection and care, and an increase in connection in our loving relationships, right? When I told you earlier, it's like if you think about the different people in your life, they feel a different way in your body. So even if I'm not with them, my practice of love begins to shift in creating moments of love that, like, oh, when I think about this person, I think about that way we connect, those loving moments of connection. And so this is what happens in the research. Loving kindness and compassion phrases, repetition, structural changes in the brain, changes in emotion states, which then changes our behavior. We're a lot more patient and loving and kind. And then that makes people want to be closer to us, right? So let's go ahead and move into, make sure I don't have any additional, yep, so we're ready for the practice. So finding a sense of peace and gentleness in your posture of what does my body need in this moment. So allowing yourself to sit or lie down or standing if that's more comfortable. And this is the formal practice. We're going to start with the formal practice this time. Just allowing the eyes to soften or close, allowing the upper body to be in as straight a line as possible, like being pulled a string from your pelvis upward through the top middle of your head. So you're very upright in whatever way you are, laying down or seated. And if you wish, placing a hand or hands over the body. And this is a reminder to bring not just awareness, but kind, loving awareness to your experience and to yourself. Allowing any tension to let go in the body if possible. No need to control it. Just allowing the jaw to soften if that's tense, allowing the shoulders to soften if they're pulled up. And then coming into 3 deep cleansing breaths just at your own pace. Noticing the nourishment of the in-breath and the soothing of the out-breath. Breathing in the oxygen that you need and letting go of the carbon dioxide no longer needed. And then allowing the breath to move into its own natural rhythm. And again, you can have the eyes closed completely, or you can have them gently open and just softly focus down on the floor, just at a 45-degree angle. But here you're just recognizing a being as you continue breathing that naturally brings happiness to your heart, a sense of joy. Just picturing this being clearly in the mind and recognizing how much they wish to be happy and have a relationship with suffering that alleviates that suffering, even if it's just a little bit. Perhaps recognizing a little bit of warmth in your heart as you think about this being, just noticing them vividly in the image in the mind, and then sending these phrases, these well wishes to this being. May you be happy. Repeating after me out loud or internally. May you be peaceful. May you be free. May you be as healthy as possible. May you live with ease. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free. May you be as healthy as possible. May you live with ease. And now just begin to create an image in the mind of you with this being. Just noticing how it feels, even in the mind, to be around this being. And notice how the two of you together wish for each other to be happy and to alleviate suffering in your life. So you wish it for each other and you wish it for the two of you together. Let a sense of happiness be there in your connection. How much you appreciate being with them and how much they appreciate being with you. This could also be a pet that you've been thinking about. Just holding that image of the two of you in the mind, acknowledging your wish to be happy together, and then sending these well wishes to the two of you. May we be happy. May we be peaceful. May we be free. May we be as healthy as possible. May we live with ease. May we be happy. May we be peaceful. May we be free. May we be as healthy as possible. May we live with ease. And now either allowing this being that you've been focusing upon to continue to be there, just allowing your focus to focus more on yourself for a moment. Just noticing how you feel in the body, recognizing how much this being that you were thinking about values you, a pet, a loved one. child, and just noticing how much you wish to be happy and free from suffering. And begin sending these well wishes to yourself. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free. May I be as healthy as possible. May I live with ease. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free. May I be as healthy as possible. May I live with ease. And just noticing how you feel in the body, connecting with the breath. Perhaps just one more time, recognizing the suffering of the world right now, the connection with all beings, all doing their best to be happy. Perhaps picturing images of groups of people, particular countries, your own community, and begin sending these well wishes to these beings who also wish to be happy and to have a relationship with suffering that alleviates that suffering, even if it's just a little bit. Just repeating after me. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free. May all beings be as healthy as possible. May all beings live with ease. Now expanding awareness into the whole body breathing. Just noticing how the body feels in this moment. Allowing yourself to feel the way that you're feeling, to be just as you are, with no need to make it any different. And then slowly, gently as you're ready, allowing the eyes to open once again. So you might also notice that during that practice there were background sounds going on. So that's okay if that was distracting to you in some way. You can just allow sounds to come and go as sounds. But now reflecting on what you noticed during that practice, what it was like to send the loving kindness phrases to a loved one, what it was like to send the two of you together. And if that felt different from sending it to just yourself, or your sense of connection, of love, the wish for happiness of those in the world who may be suffering, just noticing how you feel. What are you noticing in the body, the emotions? noticing if anything has shifted or changed within you just by doing this practice. So, a form of this practice that I like to use, and actually I started doing this even before I came across um, the teaching of it, the way that a particular teacher talks about it. One of my favorites, Sharon Salzberg, actually did a couple of videos on this, and she calls it street loving kindness. So this would be the informal, the lived equivalent of the seated practice that we just did. So, what you're doing is you're noticing a place that you visit frequently or people that you visit with frequently who may be difficult or challenging, or maybe that you enjoy or feel that sense of love that we were talking about, or out just doing a grocery run or to the bank or just out to get some fresh air, and maybe you see people. So you notice in your own body how you're feeling, and notice your common humanity with those around you, that everyone suffers in some way and has hopes and dreams. And then you just begin internally. You can start with yourself if you wish, of just with your eyes open, out walking around and seeing people, just saying, may I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free. And just continuing those repetitions towards yourself. And then perhaps in this instance, maybe we're at the grocery store and we're walking by people, perhaps with our masks on, and noticing everyone. And just as someone moves by us in the mind, just sending them the well wish. May you be peaceful. Maybe the next person walks by. May you be happy. Maybe someone looks like they're having a hard time. Just in the mind, just sending to them, may you be kind to yourself. May you be as healthy as possible. So I use this a lot anytime I ride public transportation or I'm out walking, going for a walk, of just as people pass by, I'm sending them loving kindness phrases, just whatever. It could be, may you be courageous. May you be, it doesn't have to be the ones that were in the practice, but you can send whatever you feel that they need. And then in between people, then just sending yourself, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be peaceful. And then when someone comes into your awareness, either just in the mind or physically walking by you, then you're sending them a loving kindness phrase. It's a lovely lived practice to engage in. Okay. So that's the formal and the informal version of that particular practice. So, as always, and as I was going to mention, you can always Google Sharon Salzberg. I sometimes have her information up on this list of websites, but she's pretty easy to find. If you go to YouTube or just Google Sharon Salzberg, Salzberg, her information will come up, and she has a lovely podcast and other um, ways of practicing and teaching that are really lovely and a joy to hear. She does a lot of interviews as well. But the main neuroscience and research-based practices are out of www.self-compassion.org. That's Kristen Neff, the leading researcher in mindful self-compassion. And then her professional partner, Christopher Germer, out of Harvard Medical School, chrisgermer.com. Both of their websites have free guided downloadable meditations that you can access. And then the UCSD Center for Mindfulness has a website, centerformsc.org/meditations. If you just go to the main website, you'll see one of the drop downs for meditations, and you can access a number of practices for free, just like Chris's and Kristen's websites. And then my website, www.emfm.space. So thank you so much for joining us for Mindful Compassion Hour, this 6-week series on the compassionate relationship with suffering. I hope that this has been transformative for you in any way, shape, or form that felt good and connected, so that we can alleviate a little bit of that suffering and learn how to be good, loving, kind, gentle, compassionate friends to ourselves. You can always find these practices through the videos, the seminars at www.nwpf.org. They're always available, archived, and free. And please do stay tuned. We will be doing other series in the future, so you can be on the lookout for that. And again, may you be free from inner and outer harm. May you be safe, happy, and peaceful and joyful, and finding that joy in others and your sense of love and connection and forgiveness towards yourself and towards others. May you find peace. Thank you so much, and until next time.